Picture a land lost to time, swallowed by the waves, and erased from history, a civilization so advanced, so mysterious, that its very existence feels like a whisper from another world. This isn't Atlantis we're talking about, though its legend often overshadows another enigma just as fascinating, Lemuria, a continent said to have vanished beneath the ocean, leaving behind only fragments of myth, scattered clues, and a puzzle that has captivated explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. What if I told you that long before modern maps, before recorded history, there might have been a land bridging continents, home to a people whose secrets sank into the depths? This is the mystery of Lemuria, a story that blurs the line between legend and reality. The tale of Lemuria begins not with ancient texts or crumbling ruins, but with a scientific puzzle. In the 1800s, biologists studying lemurs, those wide-eyed, enigmatic primates, noticed something strange. Fossils of these creatures were found in India and Madagascar, but nowhere in between. How could that be? The answer, some theorized, was a lost landmass connecting the two regions, a bridge swallowed by the sea, and so the idea of Lemuria was born. But here's where it gets even stranger. Unlike Atlantis, which was woven into philosophy by Plato, Lemuria emerged from the cold logic of science, only to spiral into a web of myth, occult fascination, and even claims of a utopian society with technologies beyond our understanding. Why does Lemuria haunt our imagination so deeply? Perhaps because it speaks to something primal in us, the fear of oblivion, the thrill of discovery, the longing to uncover what was forgotten. Every culture has its flood myths, its stories of cities drowned by divine wrath or natural cataclysm. But Lemuria feels different. It's not just a cautionary tale, it's a riddle waiting to be solved. Was it a real place, a geological fluke, or pure fantasy? Could the echoes of its existence still linger in the DNA of plants, the legends of indigenous tribes, or the strange underwater formations that defy explanation? As we dive into the shadows of this vanished world, prepare to question what you know about history, because the truth about Lemuria might be stranger than anything we've dared to imagine. The story of Lemuria begins with a zoologist named Philip Sclater, a man more concerned with lemurs than lost continents. In 1864, he published a paper that would unknowingly spark one of history's most enduring mysteries. Staring at the distribution of lemur fossils clustered in Madagascar and southern India but absent in Africa or the Middle East, he proposed a radical idea. What if these creatures hadn't crossed oceans by chance, but had once roamed a vast landmass that later sank beneath the waves? He named this vanished bridge Lemuria, after the primates that hinted at its existence. At the time, it was pure geological speculation, a temporary answer to a scientific riddle. But like all great myths, the idea took on a life of its own. Within decades, Lemuria escaped the confines of academic journals and leapt into the realm of the extraordinary. Scientists of the era, grappling with incomplete fossil records and the puzzle of continental drift, debated its plausibility. Some suggested it could explain not just lemurs but the strange similarities between plants and animals across distant shores. Yet others, like the eccentric biologist Ernst Haeckel, went further. He proposed Lemuria as the cradle of humanity itself, a tropical paradise where the first humans might have evolved. Suddenly, a dry scientific hypothesis was morphing into something grander, a lost world of forgotten ancestors. But the real transformation came when mystics and occultists seized the idea. In the late 19th century, figures like Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, wove Lemuria into their esoteric visions. She described it not as a mere land bridge, but as a spiritual super-civilization inhabited by giant, egg-laying hermaphrodites with psychic powers. According to her, these Lemurians were the third, root race of humanity, beings who had mastered energies beyond modern comprehension before their continent met its watery fate. From there, the legend spiraled into wilder territory, claims of crystal cities, advanced technologies, even connections to extraterrestrial visitors. What began as a zoological footnote had become a mirror for humanity's deepest fantasies. The irony is delicious. A theory born from rigorous science became a playground for the mystical, a blank slate for every utopian dream and apocalyptic warning. And yet, buried beneath the layers of myth, there's a haunting question. Could there be a kernel of truth in Sclater's original idea? Modern geology dismisses the concept of a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean, but we now know Earth's landmasses have shape-shifted dramatically over millennia. Submerged land bridges did exist. Doggerland linked Britain to Europe, Sunderland connected Southeast Asia. Could Lemuria have been a real, if smaller, landmass lost to rising seas? Or is its enduring appeal proof of something deeper, our need to believe that greatness once existed, only to be swallowed by time, waiting to be rediscovered? Strange as it may seem, the echoes of Lemuria might not belong solely to the realm of Victorian speculation or occult fantasy. Half a world away from the debates of 19th-century scientists, a collection of ancient Tamil poems whispers of a lost homeland swallowed by the sea. These texts, known as Sangam literature, date back over 2,000 years and speak of vast territories devoured by the ocean, a cataclysm so devastating that it forced entire civilizations to flee. Could these be fragmented memories of Lemuria, or are we witnessing the irresistible human urge to connect dots across time? The Sangam poems describe a land called Kumari Kandam, a lush, sprawling continent south of present-day India. According to the text, it was a cradle of advanced culture, home to sprawling cities, towering academies, and a people versed in both science and spirituality. But then came the floods, not once but twice. The sea rose without mercy, carving away the land until only fragments remained. Survivors scattered, carrying their knowledge northward, seeding new civilizations. The parallels to Lemuria are striking, but here's the catch. The Sangam works were largely rediscovered and compiled in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, right when the Lemuria hypothesis was circulating in academic and mystical circles. So, were these Tamil texts independent evidence of a sunken land? Or were later interpreters reshaping old stories to fit a modern myth? Digging deeper, the ambiguity only grows. Some verses describe submerged cities with startling specificity, even naming lost rivers and mountains. Others, though, are more poetic, speaking in metaphors of loss and rebirth. The most tantalizing detail, a few Sangam passages reference an ancient land bridge connecting India to a southern continent, eerily mirroring Sclater's original zoological theory. But skeptics argue that flood myths are universal from Mesopotamia to the Andes, and that humans have always used them to explain the unexplainable. Even if Kumari Kandam was real, could it simply have been a smaller landmass like the Sunderland Shelf, rather than a continent spanning Lemuria? Then there's the question of reinterpretation. Tamil revivalists in the 20th century enthusiastically linked Kumari Kandam to Lemuria, weaving both into a narrative of Tamil cultural superiority and lost glory. This fusion of nationalism and mysticism further blurred the line between archaeology and legend. Modern geologists, while acknowledging that sea levels have fluctuated dramatically since the last ice age, find no evidence of a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean. Yet the stories persist, passed down in folklore, encoded in temple carvings, even surfacing in the oral histories of coastal tribes from Sri Lanka to Sumatra. What's fascinating isn't just whether these texts describe Lemuria, but why we so desperately want them to. Perhaps Kumari Kandam, like Plato's Atlantis, serves as a mirror reflecting our fears of environmental cataclysm, our nostalgia for forgotten golden ages, or even our secret hope that greatness isn't lost, just waiting to be found. Whether these ancient Tamil verses are records or reimaginings, they prove one thing: the power of a drowned world to captivate us isn't about geology at all. It's about the stories we tell to make sense of the unknown and the shadows they cast across time. The legend of Kumari Kandam lingers like a shadow across southern India, a story so vivid it feels less like myth and more like a half-remembered history. Unlike Lemuria, born from a scientist's hypothesis, Kumari Kandam emerges from Tamil oral traditions, songs and epics passed down through generations, speaking of a land drowned by the sea. The details are specific: a sprawling continent south of present-day India, lush with forests and rivers, where scholars gathered in towering academies and poets composed works of unparalleled beauty. Then came the waves, not a single flood, but two great deluges that carved the land into fragments, leaving survivors to flee northward with what little knowledge they could salvage. What makes this story so compelling isn't just its tragedy, but its eerie parallels to Lemuria. Both describe a bridge between lands, a civilization lost to the ocean's hunger. Tamil texts even speak of a land connection to a southern continent, almost mirroring the zoological puzzle that first inspired Sclater's theory. But here's where the water's muddy. Modern geologists point out that while sea levels did rise dramatically after the last ice age, submerging coastal areas like Sunderland, there's no evidence of a continent-sized landmass sinking in the Indian Ocean. So, are these shared details mere coincidence, or could they hint at a collective memory of real cataclysms? The debate takes a sharper turn when you consider how these stories were revived. Tamil scholars in the early 20th century, eager to reclaim a pre-colonial identity, began linking Kumari Kandam to Lemuria, weaving both into a narrative of Tamil cultural supremacy. Suddenly, the lost land wasn't just a setting for ancient floods, it became the cradle of all human civilization, a place where language, art, and science first flourished. Nationalism and mysticism intertwined, blurring the line between archaeology and aspiration. Yet, even stripped of revisionism, the Kumari Kandam legend holds haunting power. Coastal tribes from Sri Lanka to the Andaman Islands still recount tales of ancestors who fled advancing waters. Submerged ruins off India's coast, like the ancient city of Dwarka, prove that the ocean has swallowed human settlements before. Could Kumari Kandam have been one of them, not a continent, but a thriving coastal culture erased by rising seas? The answer might lie not in proving the legends true, but in understanding why they endure. Every culture has its lost world: Atlantis, Mu, wise, but Kumari Kandam and Lemuria share something deeper. They're not just warnings of nature's fury, they're vessels for our deepest anxieties and hopes. The fear that greatness can vanish in an instant, the longing to believe that somewhere beneath the waves lies proof we were once more than we are today. Whether these stories are history or hallucination hardly matters. What fascinates is the way they refuse to sink, resurfacing again and again, as relentless as the tides. By the late 19th century, the scientific debate around Lemuria had taken a sharp turn from zoological curiosity to something far more mystical. Enter Helena Blavatsky, a woman whose name would become synonymous with the occult revival of the era. A co-founder of the Theosophical Society, Blavatsky was no stranger to controversy. With a flair for the dramatic and an appetite for esoteric knowledge, she reframed Lemuria not as a lost landmass but as a spiritual epicenter of ancient power. In her sprawling work The Secret Doctrine, she wove Lemuria into a grand cosmic narrative, positioning it as the home of humanity's third, root race, a lineage of beings far removed from modern man. Blavatsky's Lemurians weren't just early humans. They were giants, towering figures with egg-laying biology and a third eye that granted them psychic sight. According to her, these beings communicated telepathically, wielded energy beyond our understanding, and lived in harmony with forces modern science couldn't fathom. Their downfall came not just from geological catastrophe but from spiritual corruption, a fall from grace that doomed their continent to the depths. This wasn't science, it was mythology dressed in the language of the divine, a story designed to explain humanity's supposed decline from ancient enlightenment to modern mundanity. The Theosophical Society, with its mix of Eastern mysticism and Western esotericism, became a magnet for intellectuals and seekers disillusioned with rigid materialism. Blavatsky's version of Lemuria offered something tantalizing, proof that humanity had once been greater, wiser, more. Her writings described crystal-powered cities, advanced technologies fueled by cosmic energy, and a society so sophisticated it made Victorian Europe look primitive. For her followers, Lemuria wasn't just a lost continent, it was a lost destiny, a reminder that modern humans were shadows of their former selves. Critics, of course, dismissed Blavatsky as a fraud, pointing to inconsistencies in her accounts and accusations of fabricated, ancient texts. Yet her influence was undeniable. Theosophy's Lemuria seeped into spiritual movements, art, and even early science fiction, inspiring tales of hidden masters and forgotten civilizations. It also laid the groundwork for later pseudo-histories, from the hollow earth theories to claims of extraterrestrial intervention in human evolution. What's fascinating isn't whether Blavatsky's claims were true, but why they resonated so deeply. In an age of industrialization and upheaval, her Lemuria offered a counter-narrative, one where progress wasn't linear, where the past held secrets the present had forgotten. Whether as metaphor or delusion, her vision transformed Lemuria from a geological hypothesis into a mirror for humanity's aspirations and anxieties. And in doing so, she ensured that the lost continent would never again be just a footnote in a zoologist's journal. It had become a legend. Science has a way of rewriting old mysteries, and Lemuria is no exception. What began as a plausible theory in the 1800s, a sunken land bridge explaining the spread of lemur fossils, collided headfirst with the 20th century's greatest geological revelation, plate tectonics. Suddenly, the Earth's crust wasn't static but a shifting puzzle, with continents drifting like rafts on molten rock. And in this new framework, Lemuria's existence crumbled. The irony is striking. Philip Sclater's original hypothesis wasn't fringe science for its time. In an era before anyone understood continental drift, land bridges were a reasonable explanation for why similar species appeared on opposite sides of oceans. But by the 1960s, the evidence was undeniable. Satellites mapped the seafloor, revealing mid-ocean ridges where new crust formed, while seismic data showed plates grinding past one another. The Indian Ocean, it turned out, wasn't hiding a drowned continent, just the scars of ancient collisions. India, once part of the supercontinent Gondwana, had broken free and plowed into Asia, lifting the Himalayas in its wake. Madagascar, meanwhile, split from Africa and drifted eastward, stranding its lemurs in isolation. No sunken landmass required, yet here's where the story twists. While plate tectonics demolished the idea of Lemuria as a continent, it didn't erase all traces of lost land. During ice ages, when sea levels dropped hundreds of feet, vast stretches of continental shelf rose above water. The Sunda Shelf connected Southeast Asia into a single landmass, while Doggerland linked Britain to Europe. Could a smaller, temporary land bridge have existed between India and Madagascar? Some geologists concede it's possible, but it wouldn't have been the sprawling utopia of myth. More likely, it was a narrow corridor, here one glacial period and gone the next, leaving no continental wreckage behind. Modern tools have only deepened the mystery. Sonar mapping and satellite gravity surveys show no massive submerged plateau where Lemuria was supposed to lie. Yet off the coast of India, strange underwater formations like the sunken Adams Bridge between India and Sri Lanka still spark debate. Are these natural sandstone shoals or remnants of human activity? The consensus leans toward geology, but the allure of the unknown persists. What's fascinating isn't just that science disproved Lemuria, but how it reshaped the legend. The same theory that erased Sclater's land bridge gave us a dynamic Earth, where continents dance and oceans open and close over eons, in a way that's even more magical than a sunken civilization, a planet alive with change, where every mystery solved reveals another waiting beneath the waves. Lemuria may not exist, but the questions it inspired, those are very much above water. Atlantis and Lemuria, two vanished worlds, both drowned by the sea, yet only one dominates our collective imagination. Why does Atlantis, a story spun by Plato over 2 millennia ago, eclipse Lemuria in pop culture? The answer lies not just in age, but in the very nature of their myths. Atlantis was framed as a cautionary tale from the start, a hubristic empire punished by the gods, its fate sealed in fire and water. Lemuria, by contrast, began as a dry scientific theory before morphing into something far stranger, a blend of occult mysticism and nostalgic yearning for a purer, lost humanity. The differences run deeper than their origins. Atlantis, as Plato described it, was a naval superpower, a Bronze Age society of conquerors and engineers brimming with wealth and ambition. Its destruction was moral, a consequence of corruption and divine retribution. Lemuria's downfall, depending on who you ask, was either geological inevitability or spiritual collapse. Blavatsky's Lemurians weren't warlords but psychic giants, their civilization collapsing under the weight of their own esoteric excesses. One represents the dangers of power, the other, the fragility of enlightenment. Pop culture latched onto Atlantis because its narrative is primal, a rise and fall arc fit for epic films and allegories. From Disney's animated utopia to blockbusters like Aquaman, Atlantis is shorthand for a golden age waiting to be rediscovered. Lemuria, meanwhile, lingers in the shadows, favored by occult literature and fringe theories. It lacks the tidy moral punch of Plato's story, instead offering something more ambiguous, a land not of kings and treasures, but of forgotten wisdom and unanswered questions. Symbolism also separates them. Atlantis is a mirror held up to empire, a warning about overreach that resonates in every era of human expansion. Lemuria reflects a different anxiety, the fear of lost knowledge, of civilizations that might have surpassed us spiritually or technologically. Its appeal is subtler, more introspective. While Atlantis fuels fantasies of exploration, what if we found it? Lemuria invites quieter speculation, what if we were it, and what if we forgot? Yet for all their contrasts, the two legends share a core truth. Both speak to humanity's obsession with the idea that greatness is always behind us, sunken beneath waves of time or catastrophe. Whether through Plato's moralizing or Blavatsky's mysticism, these lost worlds remind us how easily history, real or imagined, can slip through our fingers. Atlantis may dominate the spotlight, but Lemuria's enduring whisper asks a harder question. What if the most important ruins aren't made of stone but of stories? Crystals shimmer at the heart of the Lemuria legend, transforming the lost continent from a geological curiosity into a new age techno-utopia. The idea didn't emerge from ancient texts or archaeological digs, but from the swirl of 20th century mysticism, where science fiction, occultism, and a growing disillusionment with industrial society collided. Picture this: towering citadels powered not by steam or electricity, but by humming monoliths of quartz and amethyst, channeling cosmic energy to heal, communicate, even manipulate matter. This vision of Lemuria as a crystal-powered paradise didn't just capture imaginations, it rewrote the myth entirely, turning a sunken land into a mirror for humanity's deepest technological fantasies. The roots of this crystalline obsession trace back to the Theosophists, particularly Frederick Spencer Oliver's 1894 book A Dweller on Two Planets, which described an advanced civilization using vril energy stored in sacred stones. But it was Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, who fully crystallized the concept. In the 1920s and 30s, cases trance-induced readings described Lemuria as a society where firestones and tuoi crystals, gigantic prismatic generators, harnessed Earth's ley lines to power cities, levitate objects, and even extend lifespans. According to Case, these technologies weren't destroyed but hidden, waiting to be reactivated by chosen souls in a future age of enlightenment. Modern crystal enthusiasts took these fragments and spun them into an entire cosmology. Books like The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life merged Case's visions with quantum physics buzzwords, suggesting Lemurians used high-vibration crystals to manipulate spacetime itself. The appeal is obvious. In a world grappling with climate change and fossil fuel dependence, the idea of clean, limitless energy, tapped by a forgotten ancient science, feels like both a revelation and a reproach. Workshops from Sedona to Bali now promise to teach Lemurian crystal codes, while online forums buzz with claims of discovering energy grid points marking the lost continent's ruins. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it as pseudoscience wrapped in spiritual packaging. Real quartz crystals do have piezoelectric properties. They generate tiny voltages under pressure, but scaling that up to power cities requires a leap even fantasy writers might balk at. Geologists point out that no submerged crystal temples have been found, and the ancient artifacts sold as Lemurian seed crystals are often just Brazilian quartz with artificially etched markings. Yet the myth persists, fueled by deeper yearnings. Crystals, with their natural beauty and perceived purity, symbolize everything industrial society seems to lack: harmony with nature, connection to the divine, a sense of lost ancestral wisdom. What's fascinating isn't whether Lemurians really wielded crystal lasers, but why we're so determined to believe they did. Perhaps it's easier to imagine a past where technology was mystical and benevolent, rather than a future where we solve our crises through messy, incremental science. Or maybe, in an age of screens and synthetic materials, we crave a tangible magic, something as solid as a stone, yet shimmering with possibility. The crystal cities of Lemuria may never be found, but their glow lingers, illuminating not the ocean floor, but the uncharted depths of human longing. Rising like a sentinel from the forests of Northern California, Mount Shasta doesn't just dominate the landscape, it looms large in the mythology of Lemuria. While the lost continent supposedly sank beneath the Indian Ocean, whispers persist that its survivors fled to this volcanic peak, carving out a hidden world beneath its snow-capped summit. How did a mountain thousands of miles from Lemuria's theoretical location become ground zero for its legend? The answer lies in a tangled web of folklore, conspiracy, and a few too many vivid imaginations. The story begins in the early 20th century when a Rosicrucian mystic named Frederick Spencer Oliver published A Dweller on Two Planets, a book channeling the memoirs of a Lemurian elder. Oliver claimed the mountain housed a sprawling subterranean city called Telos, where ageless Lemurians preserved their ancient wisdom in crystalline halls. But it was the tales of encounters that truly ignited the myth. Hikers reported robed figures appearing suddenly on the slopes, tall, serene beings who vanished into thin air. Locals spoke of strange lights pulsing inside the mountain, while others swore they'd stumbled upon hidden entrances guarded by swirling mist. Even the nearby town of Weed became a hotspot for believers, with shops selling Lemurian crystals said to resonate with Telos's energy. Then came the conspiracy layers. In the 1980s, a man named Brother Philip, leader of the mystical Abbey of the Lemurians, insisted he'd been inside the mountain, describing gold-plated elevators descending miles beneath the earth. UFOlogists merged the legend with flying saucer sightings, suggesting Shasta was a galactic portal. New Age proponents took it further, alleging the Lemurians were interdimensional beings communicating through meditation or dreams. The mountain became a Rorschach test for the unexplained, every odd geological formation, or whether anomaly was proof of the hidden civilization below. Geologists, of course, roll their eyes. Mount Shasta is an active volcano with extensive lava tubes, but there's no evidence of crystal cities or secret elevators. Yet the stories endure, fueled by the mountain's eerie presence. Its sudden storms, its isolation, the way clouds sometimes cling to its peak like a shroud, it all feels otherworldly. Maybe that's the real secret. Mount Shasta's Lemurian link isn't about history, but the human need to believe that magic still exists just out of sight. And if you stand on its slopes at dusk, watching the light fade behind those silent ridges, you might just feel it too, the pull of a story too beguiling to dismiss. While Lemuria might lack Atlantis's Hollywood fame, its fingerprints are everywhere, if you know where to look. Marvel Comics introduced the Lost Continent to mainstream audiences in the 1960s, transforming it into the underwater kingdom of the Deviants, a genetically unstable race ruled by the brooding warlord Crow. Here, Lemuria wasn't just a sunken relic but a living, breathing dystopia, hidden beneath the waves with advanced technology and a vendetta against the surface world. The parallels to Blavatsky's occult visions are striking, though Marvel swapped crystal mysticism for sci-fi spectacle. The Deviants' Lemuria became a narrative playground, clashing with the Eternals and even serving as a refuge for Nama the Submariner during his exile from Atlantis. It's a twist that would make Philip Sclater chuckle, his zoological hypothesis reimagined as a backdrop for superhero battles. Beyond comics, Lemuria bubbles up in unexpected corners of pop culture. The anime series Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, reimagines it as the birthplace of an ancient civilization wielding orbs of unimaginable power, while the Tomb Raider franchise drops hints of Lemurian artifacts scattered through forgotten temples. Even tabletop games like Call of Cthulhu weave the Lost Continent into their mythos, framing it as a hub of forbidden knowledge where cultists commune with elder gods. What's fascinating is how these adaptations cherry-pick elements of the myth. Sometimes it's the crystal tech, other times the psychic mutants, but rarely the dry science that started it all. Then there's the stranger side of Lemuria's pop culture life. B-movies like The Lemurian Stone turn it into a treasure hunt schlockfest, complete with Nazi occultists and laser-shooting relics. Podcasts and indie games, meanwhile, often lean into the conspiracy angle, portraying Lemuria as a suppressed truth, its history guarded by shadowy organizations. This malleability is the myth's greatest strength. Unlike Atlantis, burdened by Plato's moralizing, Lemuria can be whatever the story needs, a cautionary tale, a utopian dream, or just an excuse for underwater fight scenes. Perhaps the most telling adaptation is the way modern media blurs Lemuria with other lost worlds. Assassin's Creed and Uncharted mash it together with Mu or Atlantis, creating a generic, ancient advanced civilization trope. It's a dilution, yes, but also proof of the legend's endurance. Even when stripped of its peculiar history, the name Lemuria carries weight, a shorthand for mysteries lurking just beyond the edges of the map. Whether as a comic book battleground or a pixelated ruin, the Lost Continent refuses to stay buried. It resurfaces again and again, not because it's real, but because we keep needing it to be. Philip Sclater's original hypothesis about Lemuria wasn't born from myth or mysticism. It sprang from the meticulous study of teeth, bones, and the puzzling distribution of a peculiar primate. Lemurs, those wide-eyed, bushy-tailed creatures endemic to Madagascar, held the key to his theory. In the mid-19th century, Sclater noticed something curious. Fossilized lemur remains turned up in Madagascar and southern India, but were conspicuously absent from Africa or the Middle East. For a naturalist of his era, this pattern defied explanation. How could these animals, which couldn't swim vast oceans, exist on landmasses separated by thousands of miles of water? His solution was elegant in its simplicity, a land bridge now submerged that once connected the two regions like a prehistoric highway. But does modern biogeography support this idea? The short answer is both yes and no. Sclater's reasoning was sound for its time, grounded in the best science of the 19th century. Before plate tectonics revolutionized our understanding of Earth's geology, land bridges were the go-to explanation for the dispersal of species across oceans. Even Charles Darwin's rival, Alfred Russel Wallace, proposed similar land connections to explain animal distributions in Southeast Asia. The problem: we now know continents don't just sink en masse, they drift, collide, and fracture over eons. Madagascar, once wedged against India in the supercontinent Gondwana, broke away around 88 million years ago, carrying its lemurs into isolation. India, meanwhile, embarked on a northward journey, eventually smashing into Asia to form the Himalayas. No sunken continent required just the slow, inexorable dance of tectonic plates. Yet the story isn't entirely closed. While Lemuria as a vast Atlantis-like landmass is firmly debunked, the Indian Ocean's past holds subtler secrets. During the last ice age, when glaciers locked up vast quantities of water, sea levels dropped by as much as 400 feet, exposing stretches of continental shelf. Temporary land bridges did form not permanent continents, but narrow corridors that could have allowed species to hop between now isolated areas. The Seychelles, for instance, were once part of a much larger microcontinent called Mauritius, a fragment of Gondwana that sank beneath the waves. Could a similar, smaller land bridge have existed between India and Madagascar? It's plausible, though the evidence remains scant. The lemurs themselves add another layer of intrigue. Genetic studies reveal that Madagascar's primates arrived not by a land bridge, but by rafting floating across the Mozambique Channel on mats of vegetation millions of years ago. It's a phenomenon seen elsewhere in nature, from iguanas swept to remote Pacific islands to rodents drifting on debris. But here's the twist: some lemur lineages in Madagascar show genetic divergence dates that predate the island's separation from India. This suggests their ancestors might have hitched a ride on India's northward journey before leaping to Madagascar. If true, it's a saga of survival far stranger than any land bridge, a primate odyssey spanning millennia. So where does this leave Sclater's original theory? In one sense, it's a relic of its time, a hypothesis outpaced by the revelations of modern geology. Yet in another, it captures the essence of scientific progress, a wrong answer that led to better questions. The real legacy of Lemuria's lemurs isn't a lost continent, but a reminder of how life defies boundaries, adapting to the chaos of a shifting planet. The next time you see a lemur's reflective gaze, remember, their history is written not in sunken cities, but in DNA, rocks, and the relentless motion of Earth itself. In the early 20th century, as India shook off colonial rule, Tamil scholars and activists faced a dilemma: how to reclaim an identity that predated British domination, even Sanskritic influences. Their answer lay in the whispers of Kumari Kandam, a lost Tamil homeland described in ancient Sangam poetry, now fused with the European myth of Lemuria. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was a political act. By asserting that Tamils descended from an advanced civilization swallowed by the sea, revivalists crafted a narrative of cultural supremacy, one that positioned Tamil language and tradition as the oldest, purest roots of human achievement. Suddenly, Lemuria wasn't a Victorian zoological theory or a theosophist fantasy. It became a weapon in the battle for linguistic pride and regional autonomy. The movement's figurehead, scholar Maramalai Adigal, spearheaded this rewriting of history. He argued that Tamil, far from being a derivative of Sanskrit, was the mother tongue of Lemuria's enlightened society, a language so refined it could express abstract science and spirituality millennia before Latin or Greek. Schools and pamphlets spread the idea, weaving Lemuria into textbooks as historical fact. By the 1930s, the Dravidian movement, championing Tamil separatism from North Indian hegemony, adopted Kumari Kandam as proof of their ancient sovereignty. Political rallies featured maps of the lost continent, its borders stretching from Madagascar to Australia, as speakers declared, We were global pioneers before the Himalayas rose. But this romanticized past wasn't without controversy. Mainstream historians balked at the lack of archaeological evidence, noting that Sangam literature's flood myths were poetic allegories, not geological records. Critics accused revivalists of cherry-picking verses, ignoring inconvenient details like the fact that Kumari Kandam's descriptions often mirrored Hindu deluge legends. Even the timeline clashed. Tamil texts dated the floods to around 10,000 years ago, while plate tectonics showed India and Madagascar separating 80 million years earlier. The dissonance didn't dampen the fervor. If anything, it fueled a counter-scholarship, with amateur researchers scouring temple carvings and folk songs for proof of Lemurian engineering or Tamil-led global exploration. The stakes grew higher after Indian independence. As the central government promoted Hindi as a national language, Tamil activists doubled down on their Lemurian legacy, framing resistance as a defense of their primordial heritage. Politicians like Periyar, leader of the self-respect movement, wielded Kumari Kandam as a rebuke to caste hierarchy, claiming the lost civilization had been egalitarian, a utopia ruined by Brahminic invasion. The myth became a mirror for contemporary grievances, its sunken cities symbolizing not just drowned glory but cultural erasure. Today, the legacy of this fusion is everywhere in Tamil Nadu, from university departments studying Kumari Kandam archaeology to blockbuster films like Kanjukandane, where characters debate the lost land's existence. Social media buzzes with viral posts comparing ancient Tamil scripts to Easter Island glyphs or Mayan numerals, evidence of a global Lemurian tongue. Yet beneath the pride lies a thorny question: when does reclaiming history slide into inventing it? The Lemuria Kumari Kandam blend endures because it's more than pseudoscience or propaganda. It's a story of resilience, a way for a people to say, "We were here first, and no wave of water or politics can wash that away." Whether myth or memory, that's a power no skeptic can sink. Theosophy may have planted the seeds, but Lemuria's esoteric roots spread far beyond Blavatsky's 19th century salons. By the early 20th century, the lost continent had become a lodestar for occultists, spiritualists, and self-proclaimed prophets, each adding new layers to its mythology. Take Rudolf Steiner, founder of anthroposophy, who wove Lemuria into his cosmic vision of human evolution. In his lectures, he described it as a realm where beings existed in a fluid state of consciousness, their bodies more ethereal than physical, their minds attuned to the rhythms of nature. Steiner's Lemurians weren't just ancient, they were otherworldly, straddling the line between spirit and matter before their civilization collapsed under the weight of materialism. This wasn't history, it was alchemy, turning geological speculation into a parable about humanity's fall from grace. Then came the channelers. In the mid-20th century, figures like Edgar Cayce and Jane Roberts claimed to receive transmissions from Lemurian entities, their trance-state revelations blending science fiction with mysticism. Cayce, the sleeping prophet, described crystal-powered energy grids and healing temples, while Roberts's Seth entity framed Lemuria as a testing ground for soul evolution, its destruction a deliberate cosmic reset. These narratives shared a common thread. Lemuria wasn't merely destroyed, it was transcended, its inhabitants ascending to higher planes or retreating into hollow earth sanctuaries like Mount Shasta's Telos. The irony is rich. A theory born from fossil records now fueled tales of interdimensional migration. Modern New Age movements have amplified these claims, repackaging Lemuria for the digital age. YouTube channels and online forums buzz with Lemurian light codes, supposedly encrypted in quartz crystals or sacred geometry. Others insist the continent's survivors seeded Atlantis or guided ancient Egypt, their knowledge preserved in esoteric symbols or ley lines. Workshops promise to unlock past life memories of Lemuria, while Instagram psychics share downloads from its elders. Skeptics dismiss it as wishful thinking, but the persistence of these ideas reveals something deeper, a hunger for connection to a purer, wiser past. What's striking isn't the divergence of these accounts, but their consistency. Whether framed as Steiner's spiritual allegory or a TikTok medium's vision, Lemuria endures as a mirror for our anxieties about technology, ecology, and identity. Its downfall is always a warning: stray too far from nature, abuse unseen energies, and history will swallow you whole. The continent may be fictional, but the fear and the hope it embodies, that's as real as the ocean's pull. The ocean hides more than just myths. It guards the ruins of real cities, their stones whispering tales of civilizations claimed by the waves. Take Dwarka, the legendary kingdom of Lord Krishna off India's western coast. Unlike Lemuria, whose existence hinges on speculation, Dwarka's remnants are tangible: submerged walls, pottery shards, even ancient anchors dredged from the seabed. Archaeologists date these structures to at least 3,500 years ago, aligning with Hindu texts that describe Krishna's golden city sinking after his death. Here, legend and reality converge, proof that cataclysmic flooding did erase human settlements, just not on a continental scale. Then there's Japan's Yonaguni Monument, a sprawling underwater formation of terraces and angular pillars that some believe to be a sunken city from the last ice age. Marine geologists argue it's a natural sandstone formation, sculpted by tides and tectonic shifts. But divers point to features that defy easy explanation: perfectly straight roads, what appear to be carved steps, and a massive monolithic structure resembling a pyramid. The debate rages, yet even skeptics admit Yonaguni challenges our assumptions. Whether man-made or not, it's a reminder that the seafloor holds puzzles we've only begun to decode. Compare these sites to Lemuria, and the contrast is stark. Dwarka and Yonaguni have physical evidence: stones you can touch, artifacts you can carbon date. Lemuria, no rubble, no tools, no submerged megaliths. Just a theory repurposed by mystics and nationalists. But here's where it gets interesting. The absence of proof doesn't always kill a legend, sometimes it fuels it. For every verified sunken city, there are a dozen whispered candidates: Cuba's alleged underwater pyramids, Malaysia's fabled kingdom of Ganga Nagara, or the Baltic Sea's mysterious anomaly that some claim is a drowned temple. These places thrive in the gap between discovery and doubt, feeding our hunger for hidden histories. Why do we cling to sunken cities, real or imagined? Perhaps because they embody our deepest existential fear that everything we build, no matter how grand, can vanish in an instant. Dwarka's ruins are a cautionary tale, Yonaguni a riddle. But Lemuria, it's a mirror. When we stare into its depths, we don't see lost stones, we see ourselves, wondering what our own cities will leave behind when the waters rise. The idea of a lost continent isn't unique to Lemuria. It's a thread woven through cultures across time and space. Take Mu, the Pacific counterpart to Atlantis, first proposed by Augustus Le Plongeon in the late 19th century. According to him, this sunken empire once stretched from Hawaii to Easter Island, its hieroglyphs telling a story of cataclysm and exile. Unlike Lemuria's scientific origins, Mu sprang from mistranslated Maya texts and wild speculation, yet it captured the public imagination just as fiercely. Then there's Hyperborea, the mythical northern paradise described by ancient Greeks as a land of eternal sunshine and godlike beings. Unlike drowned civilizations, Hyperborea wasn't destroyed, it simply vanished, receding into legend like a mirage. What unites these places isn't geography, but the human obsession with the idea that greatness lies just beyond the edges of memory. Dive deeper and the parallels grow stranger. The Mayans spoke of Aztlan, the Aztec ancestral homeland lost to time. Celtic lore tells of Wise, a city swallowed by the sea after its princess succumbed to recklessness. Even the Bible's tale of the Tower of Babel echoes this theme, a hubristic project collapsing under divine displeasure, scattering its builders into obscurity. The specifics vary, but the pattern is unmistakable: a golden age, a fatal flaw, and a disappearance so complete it leaves us grasping for proof. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're psychological blueprints, reflecting our fear of impermanence and our longing for a time when the world felt larger, more mysterious. What drives this universal fascination? Part of it might be the thrill of the unsolved, the same impulse that fuels conspiracy theories or ghost stories. But there's something deeper at work. Lost continents serve as blank canvases for our anxieties and aspirations. In an era of climate crisis, they become warnings of environmental hubris. During periods of technological upheaval, they morph into allegories of innovation gone awry. For marginalized cultures, they're symbols of stolen heritage, proof that history is written by the survivors. And for the spiritually hungry, they offer a vision of enlightenment we imagine we've forgotten. The irony is that science has given us real lost lands: Doggerland, Sunderland, Beringia, yet these don't spark the same fervor. Maybe because they lack the grandeur of myth. Doggerland was a Mesolithic hunting ground, not a crystal-powered utopia. Their stories are told in pollen samples and mammoth bones, not gold-plated temples. Lemuria and its kin endure because they're more than geography. They're mirrors reflecting whatever we need them to: cautionary tales, nationalist rallying cries, or promises that somewhere beneath the waves or ice lies proof we were once extraordinary. The continents may be fictional, but the hunger they reveal, that's as real as the ocean's depths. Among the most tantalizing remnants of Lemuria, if such a place existed, would be the echoes of its language, words or symbols left behind like footprints in the sand. Over the years, countless claims have surfaced about surviving Lemurian scripts, with artifacts ranging from curiously marked stones to entire alphabets supposedly channeled by modern mystics. One of the most infamous examples is the so-called Lemurian seed crystals, quartz rods etched with undulating lines said to hold the lost language of the continent. Sellers market these as ancient artifacts, but metallurgists quickly pointed out the markings were made with modern rotary tools. The lines, while pretty, bear no resemblance to any known writing system, just vague, New Age aesthetics. Then there's the Knockle tablets, a set of inscribed clay slabs supposedly discovered by Augustus Le Plongeon in the 19th century. He claimed they contained the sacred history of Mu, a Pacific counterpart to Lemuria, and that they proved the Maya were descendants of this lost civilization. The only problem, no one else ever saw these tablets. Le Plongeon's own sketches of the symbols matched no known Mesoamerican script, and later linguists dismissed them as outright fabrications. Yet the legend stuck, repurposed by later occultists as proof of Lemuria's global influence. More recently, internet forums have buzzed about the Vadaku Valuvar inscriptions in Tamil Nadu, a series of rock carvings some believe to be Lemurian script. Mainstream archaeologists identify them as early Tamil Brahmi, a real and well-documented writing system from the 3rd century BCE. But Lemuria enthusiasts argue the symbols show striking similarities to markings found in Easter Island or even ancient Sumer, suggesting a shared prehistoric language. Linguists counter that these similarities are either coincidental or cherry-picked, the result of seeing patterns where none exist. Writing systems evolve independently all the time. Zigzags or circles appearing in multiple cultures don't imply a cosmic connection. Perhaps the most elaborate claim comes from channelers like Valerie Bonwick, who in the 1990s published entire Lemurian phrasebooks allegedly transmitted to her in visions. Her work includes grammatical rules, vocabulary lists, even poetry, all supposedly spoken by the lost civilization. It's creative, sure, but linguists note the language bears an uncanny resemblance to a blend of Polynesian and Sanskrit, with no coherent phonetic or syntactic consistency. Unlike real ancient languages which leave traces in descendant tongues or loanwords, Lemurian, as proposed by Bonwick, exists in a vacuum, untethered to any linguistic family tree. What's revealing isn't the lack of evidence, but the desperation to find it. The search for a Lemurian script mirrors humanity's broader obsession with cracking lost codes from the Voynich manuscript to Rongorongo tablets. We're drawn to the idea that some forgotten alphabet could unlock the secrets of a superior past. Yet real undeciphered scripts like linear or the Indus Valley symbols frustrate scholars precisely because they resist easy translation. They don't conform to mystical ideals, they're messy, ambiguous, and stubbornly silent. The absence of a verifiable Lemurian language speaks volumes. If an advanced civilization had written records, wouldn't at least one durable inscription survive? Not a crystal or a clay replica, but something undisputed, a Rosetta Stone for the ages. Until then, the Lemurian language remains where the continent itself resides, in the realm of stories, not science, and maybe that's where it belongs, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a metaphor for all the things we long to understand but never quite grasp. The words may be lost, but the longing they inspire, that's written everywhere. Long before Lemuria entered the scientific lexicon or occult fantasies, humanity's oldest stories whispered of a shared nightmare, the rising tide. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Aboriginal Dreamtime, flood myths span continents and cultures, each describing a deluge so vast it reshaped the world. These aren't mere coincidences, they're fragments of collective memory, likely echoing real catastrophes that unfolded as glaciers melted 12,000 years ago. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels surged by nearly 400 feet, swallowing coastlines, islands, and perhaps entire societies. Could Lemuria's legend be another ripple in this global tide of remembrance? The timing is striking. Tamil Sangam poems describe Kumari Kandam's submergence around 12,000 years ago, an uncanny match for the dramatic sea level rise geologists call meltwater pulse 1b. Similar dates appear in Plato's Atlantis account and the Mayan Popol Vuh's flood narrative. Even the Bible's Great Flood aligns loosely with this era. While these cultures never interacted, their stories share eerie details. Warnings ignored, civilizations unprepared, survival hinging on divine favor or desperate improvisation. It's as if humanity's subconscious preserved a trauma etched by receding ice and advancing oceans. But here's where Lemuria stands apart. Unlike Atlantis's moralistic demise or Noah's righteous ark, Kumari Kandam's drowning in Tamil lore carries a quieter tragedy, the loss of knowledge. The Sangam texts mourn not just flooded cities, but drowned libraries, scattered scholars, and songs never sung again. This mirrors a very real archaeological truth. When seas rose, they didn't just erase land, they obliterated early human settlements built along now submerged coastlines. Places like Doggerland, once a thriving Mesolithic habitat between Britain and Europe, now lie beneath the North Sea, their tools and hearths preserved only in dredged-up fragments. Modern climate change adds a chilling layer to these ancient echoes. As glaciers melt at alarming rates, we're retracing steps our ancestors took, except this time we're the ones igniting the catastrophe. The parallels are uncomfortable. Like the Lemurians or Kumari Kandam's inhabitants, we've built our greatest cities along vulnerable coasts, trusting the sea to stay obedient. Yet ice cores and sediment layers tell us this compliance is temporary. The same forces that may have inspired flood myths, rising waters, erratic weather, displaced populations, are now headlines in our own unfolding drama. Perhaps that's why Lemuria's legend feels so urgent today. It's not just about a lost continent, but about the fragility of human achievement in the face of nature's rhythms. The difference: we have the science to read the warning signs our ancestors could only mythologize. When the Tamil poets wrote of Kumari Kandam's demise, they framed it as a divine reckoning. We know better, and that knowledge comes with a burden. The next flood myth might not be a metaphor, but a dispatch from Miami, Mumbai, or Manila. the waters are rising again, and this time we can't claim ignorance as our ark. From Madagascar to Easter Island, the map of Lemuria's supposed remnant stretches across oceans and cultures like a connect-the-dots puzzle of human imagination. The Indian Ocean remains the most persistent candidate, thanks to its role in Sclater's original theory, but the Pacific wasn't far behind. In the late 19th century, as the Lemuria hypothesis morphed from zoological footnote to mystical obsession, speculative maps began sprawling eastward, absorbing fragments of other lost world myths like Mu and Kuni. What made these distant waters such fertile ground for vanished continents? The answer lies in a mix of colonial-era exploration gaps, misunderstood indigenous legends, and a dash of outright fabrication. Take the Indian Ocean first. Sclater's focus on lemur fossils pinned early Lemuria theories to the stretch between Madagascar and India, but the lack of detailed seafloor surveys in the 1800s left room for fantasy. Maps from the era show hypothetical land bridges sprawling across the ocean like ghostly highways, often drawn with more artistic license than scientific rigor. When early theosophists like Blavatsky hijacked the idea, they expanded Lemuria's borders to include Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and even parts of East Africa, regions where local flood myths, like the Tamil Kumari Kandam stories, could be retrofitted into the narrative. Never mind that modern bathymetry reveals no sunken plateaus in these waters. The allure of connecting these cultural dots was too strong to resist. Then there's the Pacific twist. By the early 20th century, writers like James Churchward, author of The Lost Continent of Mu, argued Lemuria's true heart lay not in the Indian Ocean but between Hawaii and Easter Island. His evidence, a mishmash of misinterpreted Mayan glyphs, dubious translations of Hindu texts, and vague similarities between Pacific Islander creation myths. Churchward's Mu, sometimes conflated with Lemuria, other times framed as its successor, became a tabula rasa for wild speculation. Why the Pacific? Partly because its vastness hid just enough mystery. Islands like Pohnpei and Nan Madol, with their megalithic ruins, were labeled Lemurian outposts, while the Rapa Nui Moe statues were recast as monuments to a lost continental civilization. Never mind that Polynesian oral histories describe purposeful oceanic migration, not the collapse of a landmass. The Pacific's isolation made it the perfect canvas for projection. Even the Americas got drafted into Lemuria's ever-expanding geography. Mount Shasta's occult reputation as a refuge for Lemurian survivors tied the continent to the myth, while rumors of Lemurian gold in the California hills sparked treasure hunts. In South America, proponents pointed to the Nazca Lines or Tiwanaku's ruins as proof of extraterrestrial Lemurian collaboration. The pattern was always the same, a kernel of real archaeology, like the advanced engineering of Incan stonework, would be wrapped in layers of speculative fiction until the original context vanished beneath the waves of fantasy. What united these disparate locations wasn't geology, but gaps in understanding. The Indian Ocean had its lemurs, the Pacific had its unexplained ruins, the Americas had their enigmatic cultures. Where science hadn't yet provided answers, Lemuria rushed in to fill the void. Today, we know these regions' true histories, the tectonic wanderings of Madagascar, the Polynesians' incredible navigational feats, the ingenuity of pre-Columbian civilizations, but the myth endures because it speaks to something deeper than fact. It's the thrill of the blank space on the map, the suspicion that history, as we know it, might just be the tip of a very ancient iceberg. High in the pine-scented air of Mount Shasta, where the sunlight glints off snowfields and the ground hums with volcanic energy, you'll find a curious phenomenon. Storefronts advertising Lemurian healing sessions, retreat centers promising Telosian light activations, and gift shops selling rose quartz claimed to be relics of the lost continent. This isn't just fringe spirituality, it's a full-blown tourism industry built on Lemuria's mystique. where the line between spiritual seeking and commercial exploitation blurs like mist over the mountain. Every summer, thousands pilgrimage here, drawn by whispers of hidden crystal caves, interdimensional portals, and encounters with robed Lemurian elders. But peel back the glossy brochures and you're left with a pressing question. Are these retreats preserving ancient wisdom or simply profiting from a myth that refuses to die? The template for modern Lemurian tourism was arguably set in the 1970s, when New Age seekers began flocking to Mount Shasta after psychic readings by figures like Richard Doriel claimed the mountain housed a surviving Lemurian city called Telos. Fast forward 50 years and the mountain's economy thrives on this lore. Weekend workshops promise to awaken your Lemurian DNA through sound baths and crystal grids, while guided hikes purportedly lead to vortex sites where participants report tingling skin or sudden emotional releases. For a fee, you can even book sessions with self-proclaimed Lemurian channelers who deliver messages from the lost civilization's elders, often conveniently tailored to modern anxieties about climate change or social alienation. Critics argue this is pure commodification, pointing to the glaring lack of historical evidence. No artifacts, no inscriptions, no geological surveys support the existence of Telos, just a cascade of anecdotes and recycled theosophical claims. The mountain's real magic, its biodiversity, its indigenous Winnemem Wintu heritage, its awe-inspiring geology often gets overshadowed by Lemurian kitsch. Even the famed Lemurian crystals sold in local shops are usually mass-produced quartz from Brazil, their ancient etchings added with modern drills. Yet defenders counter that the retreats serve a deeper purpose. For many visitors, the rituals, whether meditating in fern-lined meadows or attuning to hypothetical energy grids, offer genuine catharsis. In a disconnected world, the idea of belonging to something ancient and wise can be its own therapy, regardless of historical veracity. The tension between commerce and spirituality isn't unique to Mount Shasta. Similar Lemuria-branded retreats have sprung up in Sedona, Bali, and Australia's Byron Bay, each tapping into local landscapes to sell the same dream of reconnection. What's revealing is how these businesses adapt the myth to fit contemporary cravings. Where Blavatsky's Lemurians were psychic giants, modern retreats frame them as eco-conscious pacifists, reflecting today's environmentalist ideals. Crystal healings now come with climate anxiety affirmations. Telos is marketed less as a physical city and more as a metaphor for humanity's untapped potential. The myth evolves not because new evidence emerges, but because it's a mirror for whatever we need it to be. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect isn't the retreats themselves, but their guests. Interviews reveal a pattern. Many attendees are professionals, teachers, nurses, tech workers seeking respite from burnout or existential dread. Few genuinely believe they'll meet a Lemurian in the flesh, but they'll happily pay for an experience that lets them feel like they've touched something transcendent. In this light, the retreats aren't selling history, they're selling hope. The real commodity isn't the myth of Lemuria, but the permission to wonder, to entertain, even briefly, that the world might still hold undiscovered magic. The irony: Mount Shasta doesn't need embellishment to be wondrous. Its snowfields glow pink at dawn. Its springs run clear and cold from glaciers older than human memory. The mountain was sacred long before Lemuria entered the conversation, and it will remain so long after the trend fades. Whether these retreats honor that legacy or exploit it depends less on the sellers than the seekers, on whether they leave with a lighter heart or just a lighter wallet. Either way, the legend endures, not because it's true, but because we keep wishing it could be. Among the most bizarre artifacts ever tied to Lemuria are the infamous Ica stones, a collection of andesite rocks from Peru, etched with scenes that defy conventional history. Discovered in the 1960s by a local farmer, these stones depict everything from humans coexisting with dinosaurs to complex medical procedures like organ transplants. Dr. Javier Cabrera, a physician who amassed thousands of these stones, claimed they were Lemurian relics, proof of an advanced civilization wiped out by catastrophe. The problem: the ancient carvings showed unnaturally crisp lines, untouched by erosion, and the stones lacked any archaeological context, no layers of soil, no accompanying artifacts. Eventually, the farmer admitted to creating them with a dental drill, inspired by comic books and popular science magazines. Yet even after the hoax was exposed, true believers clung to the stones, insisting the confession was coerced. This pattern isn't unique. The history of Lemuria is littered with manufactured evidence, from the crystal rods sold as Lemurian seed technology to the so-called knuckle tablets that supposedly documented Mu's downfall. What drives these hoaxes and their enduring appeal isn't just profit, but a deeper human craving for validation. When mainstream archaeology dismisses a beloved myth, fringe communities often fill the void with artifacts that prove the skeptics wrong. The Ica stones didn't just fool people because they were well made. They gave tangible form to a fantasy, something believers could hold in their hands. Pseudo-archaeology thrives on this dynamic. Take the case of the Michigan relics, a set of forged tablets discovered in the early 20th century, depicting a lost Middle Eastern civilization in pre-Columbian America. Like the Ica stones, they catered to a specific audience, in this case Mormon scholars seeking evidence of ancient transoceanic contact. Or consider the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, a boulder in New Mexico carved with Hebrew script, later revealed as a modern hoax. These fakes persist because they serve a narrative more compelling than truth: the idea that history, as we know it, is incomplete or deliberately suppressed. The consequences ripple beyond gullible collectors. Hoaxes like these drain resources from legitimate research, fuel conspiracy theories about academic cover-ups, and most insidiously erode public trust in science. When people are primed to believe in hidden Lemurian crystals or suppressed ancient technologies, they become vulnerable to more dangerous falsehoods, from climate change denial to anti-vaccine rhetoric. The line between alternative history and outright disinformation is thinner than we'd like to admit. Yet there's an irony here. The very techniques used to expose these hoaxes, geochemical analysis, stratigraphy, linguistic forensics, are triumphs of the scientific method. The same tools that debunked the Ica stones also helped authenticate the Dead Sea Scrolls or reconstruct the diets of prehistoric humans. Science isn't perfect, but its self-correcting nature is what separates it from myth-making. The next time you see a Lemurian artifact for sale online, remember, the real mystery isn't whether it's genuine, but why we're so eager to believe it is. Lemuria's journey from geological theory to occult obsession takes its strangest turn in the shadowy world of conspiracy theories, where the lost continent becomes a linchpin for narratives far wilder than Blavatsky or Case ever envisioned. Imagine a hidden realm beneath our feet, populated by towering Lemurian elders wielding advanced technology, collaborating with reptilian extraterrestrials and pulling the strings of global power structures. This isn't sci-fi, it's the fertile ground where hollow earth theories, alien lore, and secret societies collide, with Lemuria as the connective tissue. But why does a 19th century zoological hypothesis resonate so deeply with modern fringe movements? The answer lies in the irresistible allure of a forgotten world that they don't want you to know about. Hollow Earth enthusiasts have long claimed that Lemuria never truly vanished, it just relocated. According to these theories, survivors of the cataclysm retreated into vast subterranean cities, like Telos beneath Mount Shasta, where they evolved into ethereal beings of pure energy. These subterranean Lemurians allegedly maintain crystal-powered utopias, occasionally surfacing to guide or test surface dwellers. The irony is rich. A theory born to explain submerged land now thrives in stories of subterranean kingdoms. This pivot isn't accidental. By shifting Lemuria underground, conspiracy theorists sidestep the inconvenience of modern oceanography, which has mapped the seafloor without finding continental ruins. Instead, they invoke the ultimate unfalsifiable refuge, a realm beyond reach where evidence can't be scrutinized. Then there's the reptilian connection. Since the 1990s, figures like David Icke have woven Lemuria into a sprawling narrative of shape-shifting alien overlords manipulating human history. In this version, Lemurians weren't just spiritual giants. They were an ancient race of reptilian-human hybrids who once ruled the surface before fleeing underground or to distant star systems. Their descendants, the theory goes, now occupy positions of power as politicians and celebrities, perpetuating a global control system. It's a kaleidoscope of borrowed ideas, Blavatsky's root races, mid-century ufology, and Cold War paranoia about hidden elites. The appeal is obvious. By grafting Lemuria onto reptilian lore, conspiracy theorists fuse two potent myths, one about lost golden ages, the other about invisible puppeteers. Together, they explain both past grandeur and present dysfunction in a single, seductive package. Secret societies add the final layer. From Freemasonry to the Theosophical Society, fringe groups have claimed to safeguard Lemurian wisdom, often through alleged relics or encrypted texts. The Rosicrucians, for instance, published elaborate maps of Lemuria's supposed energy grids, while modern esoteric orders sell initiations into its mysteries. These groups thrive on ambiguity, hinting at insider knowledge without ever providing verifiable proof. The tactic is ancient, but Lemuria's nebulous origins make it the perfect vessel. Unlike Atlantis, which comes with Plato's inconveniently specific timeline, Lemuria is a blank slate. Its secrets can be endlessly repurposed, whether to sell books, justify fringe ideologies, or fuel anti-establishment rage. What unites these theories isn't evidence but psychology. Lemuria's mythos checks all the boxes of conspiratorial thinking: the romanticization of a purer past, the vilification of modern institutions, and the promise of hidden truths awaiting discovery by the enlightened few. It's a coping mechanism for complexity, reducing history's chaos to a tidy story of heroes, villains, and suppressed technologies. The real mystery isn't whether reptilian Lemurians rule the world, it's why so many find that idea more comforting than reality's messier truths. Perhaps because in a fractured world, even a dystopian fairy tale feels more coherent than the unsettling alternative, that no one is truly in control. Mainstream science long ago dismissed Lemuria as a relic of outdated geology, a charming but misguided hypothesis from an era before plate tectonics rewrote our understanding of Earth's moving crust. Modern oceanography has mapped the seafloor with satellites and sonar, revealing no signs of a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean. The consensus is clear: Lemuria, at least as a vast landmass connecting India and Madagascar, simply didn't exist. But the story doesn't end there. Even as textbooks shelved the idea, a stubborn undercurrent of dissent kept the legend afloat, blending legitimate questions with fringe defiance. Geologists point to the definitive nail in Lemuria's coffin: the movement of tectonic plates. Madagascar and India were once neighbors, yes, but as part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, which began breaking apart over 160 million years ago. By the time lemurs evolved, these landmasses were already separated by vast stretches of ocean. The puzzle Sclater sought to solve lemur fossils in India and Madagascar, but not Africa, finds its answer in rafting, not land bridges. Primates likely crossed the Mozambique Channel on floating vegetation, a phenomenon observed in other species. Case closed, not quite. A handful of researchers still push back, arguing that science might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. While rejecting a full-fledged continent, they suggest smaller, transient land bridges could have existed during periods of lower sea levels. Geologist Dr. Robert Skock, known for his controversial redating of the Sphinx, points to underwater formations like the 90th Ridge in the Indian Ocean as possible remnants of subaerial exposure. These aren't continental fragments, he admits, but perhaps stepping stones for species migration. It's a nuanced position, one that acknowledges plate tectonics while leaving room for limited land connections. Then there's the biogeographical wild card, species distributions that still puzzle scientists. The Sri Lanka Western Ghats biodiversity hotspot shares flora and fauna with Madagascar in ways that feel improbable. Certain freshwater fish, like the bizarrely distributed climbing gourami, appear on both sides of the ocean with no clear dispersal path. Mainstream explanations invoke rare long-distance colonization events, but a few mavericks like biologist Dr. Dennis Sykes argue these anomalies warrant revisiting sunken microcontinents. Not Lemuria as envisioned by theosophists, but perhaps isolated landmasses now submerged, Mauritius or the Kerguelen Plateau, that served as temporary refuges. The most vocal Lemuria advocates, however, operate outside academia. Independent researchers like Graham Hancock and ancient mystery authors often frame the scientific rejection as dogma, accusing institutions of suppressing evidence. They highlight underwater anomalies like Japan's Yonaguni Monument or India's Gulf of Combat structures as potential Lemurian ruins, despite archaeologists attributing these to natural erosion. The debate grows heated, with Hancock's Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse reigniting tensions between mainstream science and alternative history. Critics call it pseudoscience, supporters see it as challenging a rigid establishment. What's fascinating isn't who's right or wrong, but why the idea persists despite overwhelming counter-evidence. Lemuria's durability speaks to a deeper tension in how we grapple with the unknown. Science demands testable hypotheses and reproducible evidence standards that leave little room for sunken continents. But human curiosity thrives on mystery, on the tantalizing what if that no sonar map can fully extinguish. Perhaps Lemuria's real legacy isn't as a place, but as a reminder. Even in an age of satellites and submersibles, the past still holds shadows where imagination outpaces proof. Across cultures and centuries, humanity tells itself the same story, a story of golden ages lost, of wisdom drowned by time or disaster. Lemuria, like Atlantis and dozens of other vanished worlds, isn't just a geological curiosity or an occult fixation. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties and wildest hopes. Why does this myth persist, even as science dismisses it? Because it speaks to something primal in us. The fear that everything we build is temporary, and the tantalizing suspicion that our ancestors knew secrets we've forgotten. Think about how often these themes surface in modern storytelling. From dystopian films about collapsed societies to video games where players uncover ancient technologies, we're obsessed with the idea of cyclical rise and fall. The Mayans feared their world would end in fire. The Norse believed in Ragnarok, a twilight of the gods, and today we watch disaster documentaries, obsess over asteroid impacts, and debate climate tipping points. Lemuria's story fits neatly into this tradition, a cautionary tale dressed as fantasy, warning that no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to nature's whims. But there's a flip side to this fear, the intoxicating allure of hidden knowledge. The idea that Lemurians possessed crystal power or psychic abilities isn't just whimsy, it's wish fulfillment. In an era where technology both connects and isolates us, where AI outpaces human comprehension, we crave the simplicity of a lost utopia where mastery came not from algorithms but from harmony with the earth. This explains why New Age movements latch onto Lemuria as a symbol of spiritual purity, while tech visionaries fantasize about rediscovering its suppressed sciences. Both are chasing the same mirage, a past that holds the keys to a better future. Consider how this plays out in real-world behavior. Millions flock to energy vortex sites like Sedona or Mount Shasta, buying Lemurian crystals marketed as conduits to ancient wisdom. Others pore over fringe archaeology books, convinced mainstream scholars are hiding the truth. The irony is rich. Our hyper-rational, data-driven age has birthed a thriving industry of magical thinking. Why? Because certainty is exhausting. The idea that answers might lie in a sunken continent waiting to be unlocked by the worthy is more comforting than the messy reality that progress is incremental, fragile, and never guaranteed. The most revealing aspect of the Lemuria myth isn't its falsity, but its flexibility. For Tamil nationalists, it's proof of cultural precedence. For occultists, a ladder to higher consciousness. For environmentalists, a parable about ecological hubris. These competing interpretations reveal less about the past than about our present needs. When we imagine Lemuria, we're projecting our fears of collapse and our longing for redemption onto a blank canvas. Perhaps that's the real lesson hiding in these stories. Civilizations don't vanish because the gods punish them or because they meddled with forbidden forces. They fade when they stop adapting, when their stories harden into dogma, unable to meet new challenges. The resilience of the Lemuria myth, ironically, proves the opposite. Ideas survive not by being true, but by being useful. As long as we face existential threats, from rising seas to artificial intelligence, we'll keep resurrecting lost worlds, not to find answers, but to ask better questions. Could the lost continent of Lemuria rise from myth back into scientific debate? While modern geology has dismissed the idea of a sunken landmass in the Indian Ocean, the deep sea remains one of Earth's last uncharted frontiers, and history has shown us that the ocean floor still holds surprises. Consider the recent discovery of Zealandia, a mostly submerged continent east of Australia that went unrecognized until sophisticated satellite gravity mapping revealed its outline in 2017. If a landmass nearly the size of India could hide in plain sight for centuries, what else might lurk beneath the waves? Advancements in deep-sea exploration could rewrite the narrative. Robotic submersibles like those probing the Mariana Trench are now capable of scanning vast underwater landscapes with sonar and LiDAR, uncovering formations that defy simple classification. In 2022, researchers off the coast of Mauritius identified a submerged microcontinent fragment, a sliver of ancient crust that once connected Africa to India. Though nowhere near the scale of Lemuria, it proves that the Indian Ocean's geological history is still being pieced together. Future expeditions might uncover similar fragments, reigniting questions about lost land bridges and the potential for larger, undiscovered structures. Then there's the wild card of climate change. As glaciers melt and sea levels rise, they expose previously submerged coastal areas, not just drowning shorelines, but revealing them. In the Baltic Sea, retreating waters have unveiled sunken Viking settlements, complete with preserved wooden longhouses. Could shifting ocean currents or erosion one day expose anomalies that challenge our understanding of the Indian Ocean's past? Imagine a scenario where a storm strips sand from the seafloor near Sri Lanka, exposing pillars or carvings that don't fit known civilizations. Even if such a discovery were natural rock formations, the public frenzy would be undeniable. Genetics could also play a role. In 2019, a study of Malagasy populations revealed DNA markers suggesting an ancient, undocumented migration from Southeast Asia to Madagascar, a route that defies conventional models. If future research uncovers genetic ghost populations in the Indian Ocean region or traces of a vanished culture in modern DNA, it might revive speculation about a lost hub of human activity. Similarly, marine archaeologists are increasingly interested in submerged prehistoric sites like Doggerland, the North Sea's Stone Age landscape. Should similar finds emerge near the Seychelles or the Maldives, the Lemuria debate would gain fresh momentum. Of course, the biggest hurdle isn't evidence, it's interpretation. Even if explorers found a sunken city or a continental fragment, attributing it to Lemuria would require a leap of faith. Mainstream science would demand peer-reviewed analysis, carbon dating, and geological context before entertaining such a claim. But in the age of viral misinformation, the gap between discovery and mythology is narrower than ever. A single ambiguous sonar image or oddly shaped artifact could spark 1,000 YouTube documentaries before researchers finished their first lab tests. The allure of Lemuria isn't just about geography, it's about the stories we tell to fill the gaps in our knowledge. Whether through new technology, old-fashioned luck, or the relentless churn of human curiosity, the lost continent will likely resurface again and again. Not because the ocean is hiding it, but because we are. From fossilized lemurs to subterranean crystal cities, the story of Lemuria isn't just about a lost continent. It's about how easily science can spiral into myth and how myths can shape the way we see ourselves. What began as a zoologist's sensible explanation for primate fossils became a blank slate for occultists, nationalists, and dreamers, each projecting their hopes and fears onto a land that likely never existed. The irony is delicious. A theory born from rigorous observation ended up fueling fantasies of psychic giants and interstellar portals. Yet in that journey, Lemuria reveals something far more fascinating than any sunken city: the human mind's uncanny ability to blur fact and fiction when faced with the unknown. Think about how few myths evolved the way Lemuria did. Atlantis started as Plato's allegory, El Dorado as colonial greed, but Lemuria, it sprang from a scientific paper only to be hijacked by mystics, repurposed by Tamil revivalists, and finally absorbed into New Age cosmology. That transformation tells us less about vanished civilizations and more about our relentless need to fill history's gaps with meaning. When geology debunked the land bridge, believers didn't discard the idea. They moved it underground or into another dimension, proving that a story doesn't need evidence to survive. It just needs believers. But here's the twist: Lemuria's persistence isn't just about credulity. It taps into a deeper truth that history is never just facts and dates. It's the stories we tell about who we were and who we wish we'd been. For Tamil scholars, Lemuria became proof of cultural precedence. For spiritual seekers, it symbolized lost wisdom we might reclaim. Even scientists, in their way, chase their own Lemuria's hidden truths lurking just beyond the data. The difference: science corrects itself while myths endure by evolving. So where does that leave us? Not with answers, but with better questions. How much of human history is buried under layers of interpretation? How many lost civilizations are just shadows cast by our own biases? And if a place like Lemuria can captivate us for over a century without a shred of proof, what does that say about the stories we believe today? The ocean floor may hold many secrets, but perhaps the greatest mystery isn't beneath the waves. It's why we keep diving for them. Now it's your turn. Do you think Lemuria was pure fantasy, or could there still be fragments of truth waiting to surface? Drop your theories below, because the best thing about lost continents isn't finding them. It's the endless hunt.